Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 17 of College Football Throwdown. I am your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined by my dad, Peter.
Good evening.
Yes. Hello, Husker Nation. This is going to be our podcast on the Nebraska-Wisconsin game. I know it's starting to seem like the football gods are just hell-bent on making Nebraska lose every game in the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. Kind of seems that way at this point.
Well, or that our coaches don't know how to win.
Well, that too, but we'll get into that. So for those of you who haven't been listening to us before, this is a College Football Throwdown, a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans, this father-son duo. And we're going to be talking specifically about our team, the Cornhuskers, and the Wisconsin matchup right now. And then after this, we're going to record a podcast on the more national spread of what happened this week in college football. There were a couple big games that I'm definitely looking forward to talking about. But before we get into that, we're going to do our customary tradition. I believe, Dad, you have the beverage this time.
I do. I have the beverage of choice, and boy, I tell you, after yesterday's game, we needed one of these. So here we go. Oh, there you go.
There it is. All right. Now, to start with some positives, because we did
There was positives?
There were positives, because remember,
okay.
we did our predictions last week.
Yes.
And so we both kind of did like a best case, worst case scenario kind of thing. Like if we made the adjustments we were supposed to, in terms of dedicating to the run game, and if our defense played well, versus if things didn't change and we struggled and blah, blah, blah. So under those two circumstances, I said bad scenario, we lose 28-7 to Wisconsin. And then I said good scenario, we lose to Wisconsin but 17-14 and it's a hard-fought game. Then you said bad case scenario, Wisconsin kills us 42-14. Good case scenario, Nebraska wins 17-14. So when you look at it from that perspective, where we were as of last week, we played competitively with them. Certainly, we were in it to win the game. Obviously, so we didn't get blown out like last year. 60 whatever to 21, whatever the score was. So there are positives that can be brought from this.
You're right, and I'm being facetious, but it's just you're absolutely right. In fact, you can look at the collective of the season and say, one of the things that was, of course, common among Nebraska conversation was, one of the criticisms of our previous coaching staff was, this occasional blowout scenario that they would encounter. And we have been in every game. We haven't gotten blown out, So the fact is, we've been competitive. In fact, we've had the lead in every one of our four losses, within the last couple of minutes of the game. And so in most cases, the last few seconds of the game. So the reality is that we are getting what we said we wanted, from the standpoint that we're getting a team that's competitive against everyone we've played so far. So from that standpoint, that you can glean from that we are making progress. And I would also say that over the last 2 weeks, even with all the injuries and difficulties we've had on the defensive side of the ball, we have seen some areas of improvement within the overall defensive scheme, and we've continued to defend the run quite well.
Yeah, well, I think that they were the announcers on the game on Saturday. Yeah, thank you. We're making a lot of note of that they had like 500 yards of offense, because last year they had their crazy good running back, and we just couldn't do anything against him. Whereas this time, for a good portion of the game, we had held them to like 65 rushing yards or something. That number kind of got pulled up a bit in the fourth quarter, but overall, our defense, played quite well against them, and I feel like, honestly, my biggest issue with the defense was, we still have issues, in the areas we talked about before, but I think the biggest issue with the defense in this game was the offense, because it's really hard for any defense, no matter how good you are, to, keep a team from scoring on you, trying to shut them down, when the offense is going three and out, and you're on the field way longer than you should be, and that's why I think, in in a lot of our games this year, in the fourth quarter, our defense has struggled because they are getting played so much and they're not quite there at the end of the game because they've been playing so much, and then we let some big plays go.
I would agree. In this case, the focus needs to be about why our offense is incapable of doing what should be some fairly basic and fundamental things, given the talent that we have on offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and like I said last week, I wasn't able to watch the Illinois game, so I kind of got to see what you were talking about in terms of Tommy kind of struggling to throw the ball, especially when we were throwing into the wind. You know, he just made a lot of passes that were just off the mark. You know, like I forget who's the second team we played this year.
South Alabama.
South Alabama. In that game, he was throwing a bunch of great balls, and it was his receivers who were dropping them. This time, he was missing, and his receivers on occasion had to be the ones to make great catches even when the throws weren't great, or just couldn't get to the throws at all because they weren't there.
Right, exactly. And that's been Tommy's MO, is that, I think the coaches need to understand what he's capable of and not capable of, and they haven't figured that out yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, because obviously our big thing from last week was run the football. You got to commit to running the football. And I looked up at the stats for the game. In total, we had 37 rushes for 196 yards in the game and 28 passes for 129 yards. So when you look at that stat, we did rush it definitely more than we passed it. But there were so many scenarios where it was 3rd and 4. We got into a lot of 3rd and 4s, and we almost always passed it. And we got it a number of the times, but at the same time, I want a Nebraska team to be able to run it on 3rd and 4 and get it pretty consistently. You know, that's something I would expect of a Nebraska team.
Right, and my argument goes further than that, and into the point of when you're playing football in Nebraska and half your games are going to be in the state, at the stadium there in Lincoln, you can count on the fact that about half of those games are going to be in weather conditions that are less than ideal for passing the football. They're going to be rainy, they're going to be windy almost certainly, gusty windy, and very cold probably as well, at least once. And so those are all things that make it less desirable to throw the football. Mm-hmm. And so you just have to understand that fundamentally at the core of your offensive system, you must have a successful and varied offensive rushing attack, and complemented by a good passing attack. Right now, we have a guy who's trying to implement, it appears, a West Coast-based system with a little bit of this zone read, because we happen to have a quarterback right now who has that strength. But our running game has no continuity or cohesion to it. It doesn't seem like they really know what they want to do. And when they should be lining up with him under center in an I formation with a fullback and an I back, and let's run some basic counter plays and have a dive series, a power series, a quarterback keep series. We should have some basic plays. Any good to above average high school football team has those series in their playbook. Why can't we? You can also have all the West Coast offense stuff you want and all the various pass route combinations that you want, but you need to have that rushing series, and you need to commit yourself to practicing it during the week and in preseason and all over. Since last spring, they should have been implementing things that put them in a position to have that, and they didn't. It's obvious that they didn't. Right. And so now our run game consists primarily of zone reads and occasionally a counter here and there, or a quarterback keep. And we just need to have more sophistication than that. And that zip sweep or whatever, where they have the wide receiver coming along the side, it's not getting it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I just thought of one other positive of the game we can talk about, because, like you said, wind was definitely a factor in the game, and they had some issues on special teams with like missed field goals and punts that were going,
Yeah.
20 yards because they were going way up into the wind. Whereas Sam Foltz did a good job on the vast majority of his punts and made some field goals for us. So
Right.
got to be happy on that regard.
Absolutely, that's true. Yep. I mean, like we were talking, Alex, before the game, we needed to see certain things. We saw a lot of the things we thought we needed to see, except for one problem. We were more committed to the run. We did devote more of our plays to the running game. But again, when it counted, when it was needed, they ran a simpleton series of running plays, 3 in a row, and ran off basically about 20 seconds in 3 plays. When we needed to secure basically 1 first down, force them to take their timeouts, and then we would have been good to go.
Right. Well, in this case, the time management wasn't the issue because Riley actually did a good job. He was using up our timeouts while they were getting ready for their field goal. So we would have time left when we got the ball, which was good. And we knew that they were going to use up their timeouts while we were running, so that's why it only used up 20 seconds or whatever. So that's not the problem with it. My issue is just that fundamentally, you can talk about all the other issues with the rest of the game. But basically, we got a lucky break in that their field goal kicker missed that 35-yard field goal, and we had the opportunity to win the game if we just go 3 downs, run it, make it so they use up their timeouts and get a first down. One first down right there, and we win the game. It's as simple as that. And we ran 3 running plays without much creativity that didn't have any explosiveness to them, didn't catch them off guard in any way, and we were able to give the ball back to them, and they threw it over our heads just like they'd done on the last series and got into position where their field goal kicker, who's shown earlier in the game that he was capable of making 40-ish yard field goals,
especially with the wind at his back.
Right, made a good field goal, and that was the game. And I could, as soon as we didn't get it, I knew that was going to happen, and it did. Damn it.
No, it's exactly right. And so it gets back to the fundamentals of our I really believe that these losses are certainly on the individual execution of the players. I mean, the players have to execute. But I'm going to put a great deal of burden on the coaches with this too. These coaches have got to do a better job of putting our guys in a position to succeed and to give them a scheme that gives them a reasonable chance against a reasonable defense. Wisconsin's defense showed itself, throughout the course of the game to be a good defense, but not an exceptional defense. We moved the ball against them. We had success against them at various points in the game, but then we allowed them to basically pigeonhole us into this throwing game in the second half. And Tommy was like, when Tommy starts the second half 1 of 11, stop throwing it. Start figuring out some creative ways to get Tommy on some options for your short passing game, to replace your short passing game. Stop doing the screens because he's having trouble throwing a basic screen for whatever reason. You get away from that. You do these, zip sweeps that they've got, and you do some things like that, and you try to just get first downs. Just get first downs. That's all you got to do. The touchdowns will take care of themselves if you get the first downs.
Yeah, well, he
didn't do that.
Another stat thing, I believe we had 13 first downs. They had 26 because a lot of we had some big plays that helped us get into those touchdown positions. So we weren't that great in terms of consistently getting drives going. That was a big issue.
I didn't look, Alex, so I'd have to pull that stat sheet up. Maybe you still have it in front of you. But what were they on third down? Because they had to have been exceptional on third down.
Them exceptional on third down? Not really.
Yeah.
Nope.
No.
We were 8 of 18 on third down. They were 5 of 16. So.
Okay.
And that.
Well, it seemed like they were converting an awful lot, of long yardage situations where they would just get the first down. And then we would have plays where we would run on these 3rd and 5s or 3rd and 6s, and our tight ends run a route on a 3rd and 6, and he'd run a route that was 4 yards. And then he'd catch the ball and get tackled immediately and be a yard and a half short. You've got to know where the sticks are. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but, that goes to show, once again, I'm mad that our defense, once again, kind of fell apart a bit in the fourth quarter, and we're giving up these big plays. But for the majority of the game, they played quite well. I definitely saw some improvement in terms of our secondary. There were guys making plays, batting
Yep.
balls out of the air, doing good coverage
Yep.
because our run defense was doing very well against them, and so we were forcing them to throw it over top of us. And for a while there, we were doing a pretty good job of stopping them there too. It was just, once again, if our offense had been able to keep the defense on the bench, let them rest a bit, and get some momentum going, I think you wouldn't have seen that defensive collapse so much in the fourth quarter.
Absolutely. You have to get first downs, and you have to do it to some degree running the football. And if your guy who you've got at quarterback is throwing the ball poorly, like Tommy was, he was unable to hit basic screen passes. He was throwing behind guys. He was not doing a good job with the pass.
I will give them this though. At least in the beginning of the third quarter, I wouldn't be super upset that Tommy was throwing it, because just in the second quarter, right before halftime, he kind of had a switch turned on or something, and he was connecting and made that terrific pass that Alonso catched, to end the first half. So there was kind of some signs that maybe a gear had clicked in his head. But then as you go one or two drives in the third quarter and you see that gear isn't clicking, that's when you really need to realize that and
back
switch.
Off. Yeah. You got to back off as an offensive coordinator and go to other series of plays and try to establish the run and just get a first down. It's not about, I want to score or I want to throw it deep or any of that crap. It's about, I want to get a first down. I want to secure a first down. And you call simple plays, roll him out, which he's pretty good at, and you let him get a 6-yard completion. And then you let him run the football and you get a first down, and you just do the simple things. Just get a damn first down.
Yeah, because there were several times in the game where it would be third and long, and the pass broke down because it was covered well, and Tommy ran it for a first down. That his biggest asset as a quarterback is that he's good at scrambling. I remember there was one time.
I don't mind, Alex, them calling a pass play. That's not my point. I'm not saying you don't do that. I'm saying it's the type of pass plays, it's the type of running plays, it's overall their offensive scheme is just not at all a fit collectively. They have the plays that work. That's not what I'm saying. Our guys are practicing plays that will work. But we're trying to do a bunch of stuff over and over and over again that are the core of this West Coast thing that they're trying to accomplish, but they are not the core of what we're good at.
Mm-hmm.
Screen.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to say that they should do that because Tommy is good at scrambling or whatever, because he's good at that. But then, as he scrambles, sometimes he throws passes off his back leg and, that are really dangerous and stuff.
Yes.
But just my point is that, Tommy's biggest strength is his legs, and
Yes.
So to take more advantage of that, I think would be a good idea.
I absolutely agree.
One other little thing I want to talk about the game, and then we can move on. But you and I talked about this a little bit. The refs, we had a lot of penalties in this game again, which is still a huge issue. But there were some that even the announcers were kind of calling out as questionable. And there was the time when Riley got a little mad at the ref and
got a personal foul.
Got the personal foul against him, and the stadium was booing him to crap. And then they ran the exact same play the next down, and then the pass interference got called. And we were just talking about how that was like a good version of how you deal with the refs in that sort of situation versus the way Bo would have handled that situation.
Right, absolutely. No, I think everything about that was fine. And we did get a few calls that were a little ticky-tacky against us that I thought were questionable. But again, we still had, illegal procedure penalties, not being lined up properly, a defensive lineman, in the neutral zone again on a critical play, on a critical down.
I remember you mentioning
Malik Collins, got an offsides, and he didn't fire off early, so he must have been lined up offsides. because he did not leave before the snap of the ball. I mean, when they ran the replay, he did not move until the snap of the ball.
Yeah.
He wasn't across the line of scrimmage per se at that moment in time because he jumped early. He was offsides because he was lined up offsides.
Right. I remember that great play with Tommy running it with the two lead blockers in front of him, which got called back because it turned out like one of the guards was like a little bit too far back.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a horrible example because obviously that player knew that he had to pull, and he tried to cheat by being a little further back, so it was less likely that you're going to tangle your legs and get tripped up by the center, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't do that. You need to be able to have your scheme work without cheating like that, because frankly, when you cheat like that, the defense picks up on it. Number one, they'll see that, and that will decrease the effectiveness of that play the next time you run it, because now you got it on film, and people will start watching for it. And number two, you get these kind of penalties. So again, that's coaching discipline. That's on the offensive line coach. That should never, ever, ever happen. Never.
Mm-hmm. All right. So kind of talking about where we stand right now in terms of what our future goals are, because at the beginning of in the summer we were talking about how we wanted to. Our goal was that we weren't like a team that was going to be competing for national championships or anything like that, but that we wanted to be in the competition for like the Big Ten West and hopefully win that and be able to go to the Big Ten championship game, even if we lose that game. At this point, that goal is very unlikely.
Right. We would need Wisconsin to lose 2 more times, and we would need Iowa to lose once, and then us to beat Iowa. We're going to need Northwestern to lose once, and then we're going to have to beat Northwestern. And same with Minnesota. So we still have all those guys in front of us, and I'm going to presume that Illinois is not going to be in that mix. Now, on the good side of things, Illinois went to Iowa and basically could have very well won that football game against Iowa, just like they did us.
Mm-hmm. Miami too.
They were in it to the end. Yeah, exactly. So the reality is that Illinois is clearly a little better than maybe people perceive them to be earlier in the year, and they comported themselves well against Iowa, who at this point would look, given their non-conference schedule, is pretty easy going forward. Wisconsin's is ridiculously easy. So the likelihood that Wisconsin is going to lose 2 more times before the end of the season is very, very small. And so I would say that if we end up turning this thing around and say we ended up getting to, say, 7-5, losing to Michigan State, but winning all the rest of our games. If we get to 7-5, we still won't win the division because Wisconsin will beat us. Even if we both end up at 5-3 in the conference,
they would win the head-to-head.
They would win because of the head-to-head.
Yeah.
We need Wisconsin to just collapse.
Right.
Otherwise, they're going to beat us.
Right. But I think at this point, Nebraska fans should kind of accept the fact that 95% chance, that's not happening. We're not going to the Big Ten championship game this year.
Right.
But I also would say, you look at our record, we're 2-4. Definitely gives you a sobering feeling. But when you, like we said, we've been competitive against every single team we've played. We should have won a lot of those games, and a lot of those games we were the better team. Or at least a team that was on an equal level to the team we played. We weren't like so bad that we were clearly the lesser team, So
right.
All of those things would suggest that like we aren't a terrible football team. We're just, like you say, we just can't pull it out. We just can't clinch a victory, and so we're missing that little step, if that little step goes our way, we're 5-0 right now, Mm-hmm. So we're close. We're close, yeah. But we're just not there.
Right. Well, and so you ask what is realistic, and I would say at this point, if we could go, we've got 6 games left, if we could go 4-2 in these 6 games, winning 4 of the next 6, then we would maybe have enough positive momentum to do 2 things: to give people optimism that we turned a corner of some kind, and that going into the off season, there's something positive to talk about. And number two, if you get the 6 wins, we would have the opportunity to go to some lesser bowl game, potentially win that bowl game because we would be playing a lesser opponent, and then end up 7-6, have a winning season, and build on that and that positiveness for both recruiting and looking at next year. If you look at our team, we probably are going to have 17 to 19 returning starters next year if you look at the roster and who's starting right now. And frankly, from an offensive line standpoint, I think that some of the guys that are behind our starters right now who are seniors are likely to have a higher ceiling and be better players a year from now than what we've got playing right now. So for all of those reasons, I can look to that future and say, you know what, we're going to be all right. Next year, we're going to be a better football team. Now, our schedule gets tougher, and so our record won't necessarily be obviously easier, but if we get to 6-6, that would be something to kind of hold your hat on.
Yeah.
So that would be my opinion. Would be let's just win the next game. Let's beat Minnesota to stem this negative tide and start building towards the potential of getting to a bowl game and then maybe winning that bowl game and feeling good about the season and that you actually turn the thing around.
Yeah.
And so, okay, now we've got it going,
Yeah, well, because what I was texting you, I remember as the Wisconsin game was going earlier on, and you were kind of saying like we have to win this game or we're looking ahead to 2016, and
Right.
I wanted to cut off that kind of mindset because if either the fans or the team gets in that mindset, like we're screwed, then it's going to be tough for us to win many more football games at all. So that's why I agree with you. We have to kind of adjust our expectations and say we got to make our goal, getting to a bowl game. And like you say, if we could win that bowl game, 7-6, certainly not the year we wanted, but given everything that's happened, we would have to look at that as a victory. Given where we are now, if we're able to turn that around, like you say, I think that would give us positive momentum going into the end of the year.
Right, exactly. And it's just one of those things where, you have to acknowledge the elephant in the room and kind of go from there.
Yep.
So.
And I actually you probably saw this too. I guess there was we had a recruit visiting us recently, and his dad is like a former like NFL player or something of some prominence, and he was talking about like how he thinks that Nebraska fans need to kind of chill out and give Riley his time, to get his system in place. Right,
and that's a legitimate message. We do need to do that. The issue is again from a Nebraska standpoint, and why I think Nebraska fans tend to be so vocal is they have been to the top of the mountain. They've been to the mountaintop, and they know what championship football looks like. And once you've been there and you know what that looks like and you know what it takes, then you know it when you see it. And there's a particular way that we have found, and Nebraska fans have an experience of upwards of 50 years where that system and that approach worked very effectively. So it's really hard to convince a Nebraska fan that, changing to something radically different in how you approach offensive or defensive football is going to work better than that way, especially when the results clearly show that these other methods haven't worked.
Right. Well, at the same time, though, you could go into a whole debate about how football has changed so dramatically, just in general, both in terms of like the outward things like recruiting and everything else, as well as and the rule changes, as well as just the complexity of the schemes and new philosophies and all that sort of stuff. You could certainly build an argument that that if we were running that same kind of football we were in the 90s, championship run, would we be as successful with that now as we were then? Maybe not.
But I'm not necessarily saying, go back to exactly what they were doing then. But if you look around, Alex, and you look at the teams that are playing just outstanding football right now, and the ones that I would put my money most likely on to win the championship, it would continue to be Ohio State, Alabama, Michigan State, and teams of that sort. Okay, not the Oregons, not the Baylors or the TCUs that throw the ball all over the place, but teams that fundamentally run the football and play sound, tough, hard-nosed defense. Those are the teams that win championships, and that's the part that I'm getting at.
All right. And so, talking about our upcoming game, Minnesota, at Minnesota, so it's going to be another away game for us, which is going to make it tougher. I think I'm kind of going this with a similar thought as I did to the Wisconsin game. Like, I think if we come there and play to our potential, what I know our team is capable of doing, I think we can certainly beat this Minnesota team. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. But if we continue to have the same mistakes that we have shown in the past, I could see a very similar situation playing out where we play competitively with them, but then it goes away from us in the fourth quarter.
Right. Well, and one of the things is, from a matchup standpoint, Minnesota had scored a considerable number of points this past weekend, but up until then had really kind of struggled offensively. And I don't know that I would look at them and say they are a prolific offense. So particularly passing wise. So we have had some pretty good success stopping running teams, and this team is probably one of the less effective passing teams that we've played so far. So that should lend itself to a pretty decent defensive performance for us. And so then it becomes a question of, they have a great defense themselves, particularly their secondary. And so I would expect it's going to be very difficult for us to move the football against them, because our running game has obviously been very erratic and inconsistent. And I believe it's going to be very difficult for us to pass the football against them. So I would look for this to be a relatively low-scoring game this coming week, and it's all going to be about turnovers. Does Tommy throw 3 picks like he has the last couple of years against this team, that have led to losses, or do we get a decent kind of contained or controlled performance from him, where we give him simple reads, don't ask him to do too much, and then try to establish a running game? Because if we can do those things, then I think we still probably have collectively a better set of athletes than they do, and we might very well be able to win it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm gonna, in terms of my score prediction, I'm gonna kind of go with what I was talking about last week. I think if we play, if we were able to make some adjustments, like you say, simplifying the passing game and trying to give our running schemes a little bit more dynamicness, we win the game like 17-14. Like, it's going to be a low-scoring game, like you say, defensively focused game. But I certainly think we are capable of beating Minnesota.
Right. Well, and I'm going to be the negative Nelly here and say that I think that the history here has been, Minnesota's a team that doesn't make mistakes. They just don't, and they haven't since Jerry Kill became the coach there. And so I would expect to see that same kind of performance from Minnesota again this coming week, where they're not going to throw interceptions, they're not going to fumble it, and so it's going to be very difficult for us to have those momentum shifting kinds of defensive plays. So it's about whether we hold on to the football and can minimize our turnovers and mistakes like penalties. I have no data that would lead me to believe that we're going to do that. And you just know a Jerry Kill team is not going to beat themselves. And so we're going to beat ourselves more, and we're going to lose because of that. That would be my prediction. Now, what is the scenario where we win? The scenario where we win is that we run a simplified passing scheme. We're able to get our athletes in space a little bit, and some guys go out and make plays. Westerkamp, and now that DeMornay Pearsonell is back, and the emergence of Stanley Morgan and Alonzo Moore. I mean, we've got a wide receiver core that's pretty darn dynamic. We just got to get the ball in their hands, and Tommy hasn't been able to do that. I think we got to get him out of the pocket. I think we have to roll him left and right and get him to deliver that ball where he has one or two choices: A, B, or throw it out of bounds, or tuck it and run. I mean, that's where he has to be. Don't put him back in the pocket.
Mm-hmm. Right, but then that gets into the whole thing of like if he's on the run, then does he, are his passing mechanics going to be as tight? Because that's where
Actually,
he's
I would say that he's pretty good on the run, throwing the football. On a designed run, a designed rollout left or right. He's shown himself to be good in both of those situations. Where he has a problem is when he's sitting in the pocket and he is backpedaling and he throws it off his back foot, or he is fading out of a pocket to the right and he flings it, like almost sidearm because it wasn't a designed rollout. When it's a designed rollout, I think he's quite good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. So what would you, why don't you, since you phrased it that way, why don't you give us two scores, one where the one you think is going to happen versus the one where we win?
I think they're going to end up beating us like probably 28-10 because we're going to make a couple of turnovers that are going to lead to easy scores for them, and then they're going to score a couple times. So that's their 28 points. And I think because of those lost offensive series, because of the turnovers, and our inability to put together an offensive scheme that they've demonstrated through the first 6 games, I believe we score 10. Now, if we instead actually change our dynamic and simplify our scheme into the things that Tommy does well, and then diversify our running game and use more of our counters and things of that nature, then I could see us using our athleticism and beating them by a score of like 28-21, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty then. Well, we'll see which way it turns.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yep.
So, but I tell you, it'll be interesting, Alex, as we move along this season. We may have to shift our conversation and our subjects or topics a little bit because it will become more and more of a thing where we're going to have to start looking at damage control. What's the impact on the recruiting class, and what can we do as a program to position ourselves for improvement in the coming years.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yep. Well, we got to hope that this, because I remember when I was looking at our schedule, this kind of section of games here in the middle of our season, we have Wisconsin, we have Minnesota, we have Northwestern, and then I think it's Michigan State.
Michigan State,
yeah,
yep.
That's a tough run. That's some of the better teams in the conference that we play against.
Yep.
So I really think it would be important for us to find ways to win against Minnesota and Northwestern to get some of that positive momentum going into the Michigan State game, because by all likelihood that is going to be a loss, possibly a big one. So I think it would really, really be important for us to get some positive momentum before that game, because if we lose to Minnesota, we lose Northwestern, and we go out there and get killed by Michigan State, the morale in the land of the Huskers is going to be low, and that's going to be tough.
Right. I agree with you. I think if we win these next two games and we're able to get back to 500 within our conference schedule, and maybe we get lucky and Wisconsin stubs their toe somewhere, I believe we'll still have a chance for Iowa to lose a couple of games here, and maybe maybe Northwestern knocks off Iowa, for example, or something, and then it would be an issue of Nebraska of being able to basically still have the head-to-head against those remaining teams, and put yourself in a position where all we need is for somebody to take Wisconsin out one more time.
Right. Alrighty then. Well, this was a good podcast, good discussion we had, and we'll be doing another one obviously next week after the Minnesota game. So if you all out there enjoyed this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can find us at footballthrowdown.podomatic.com. We're also on iTunes under College Football Throwdown. You can give us ratings and reviews there. We like to hear back from you guys, comments on the Podomatic website. So thank you out there for listening, Husker Nation, and go Big Red.
Go Big Red.